Government gang stalking, a sign of how sadistic America has become. Erich Fromm wrote about what caused human destructiveness like government gang stalking. He said, "You would see people act with gross destructiveness when they grew up in an environment where their genuine human needs weren't met, where their potentialities and human capacities weren't allowed to unfold." This describes our society today, with its failing mass educational system and our political system's transformation into an oligarchy. Psychological and physical violence are ways people cope with impotence. The psychologically healthy person can say, "I am because I effect." The government gang stalkers can only get a feeling of power in the American oligarchy, in dramatically affecting the lives of their targets with the psychological abuse of the mob. This is our immoral, decadent society. Now the way powerless feel they can produce an effect on another human being. In order to reverse the immorality of our now decadent, destructive society in which scores of citizens engage in mass psychological torture, government gang stalking, we need to create a reformed society where people get a feeling of strength and fearlessness by developing their own powers. The mass psychological aggressiveness we are witnessing in government gang stalking is one way people with a feeling of powerlessness get rid of their anxiety. Fromm tells us it is a human need to be able to change things, to be able to move other people, to express our will. These things give us a sense of being effective in our world. When we can't affect people in positive ways in a decadent, immoral society like our own, we affect them by experiencing their fear. Thus, the same people who gang stalk advocate for bigger and bigger military budgets, for continuous war, for use of torture, for leading the world through having others fear us. The destructiveness we now see on our streets in government gang stalking began on the world stage in America's militarism, readiness to use preemptive, aggressive war to have an effect, and dismissing the loss of human life as nothing more than collateral damage. The value of respect for the individual life, for individual autonomy, is all but dead in America. People need to be able to make sense of their lives, to experience an optimum level of intensity and strength. Where the productive person has learned to rely on his inner resources, the non-productive person has not. People now get a feeling of strength in government gang stalking, in being part of a mob. We all need for a certain minimum of excitation and stimulation. This is another existential need that leads to destructiveness when frustrated. Boredom, the excessive use of drugs and alcohol are all related. Where the productive person finds stimulation in the use of her imagination and original thinking and creativity, someone living a boring, dull, repetitive life might only find stimulation in rage, in cruelty, in exerting power over others. Our society, Fromm warned, was moving in the direction of more and more alienation. Social conditions were creating certain character traits in people that predisposed them to psychological and physical destructiveness. The most prevalent character orientation in the American oligarchy is the marketing orientation. A person of this character orientation aims to derive profit through favorable exchange. Everything to him is a commodity. Even his body is seen as an instrument for success. It must look youthful. He wears the appropriate smile, projects the appropriate image. He completely adapts his personality to the cultural pattern, falling completely with the expectation of others at the expense of his own individuality and spontaneity. Thus is spawned the mass man in government gang stalking, devoid of a strong sense of separateness, of a sense of autonomy, of individuality, of differentiation that could resist the pressure of the group, the gang stalking mob. The emphasis in the American oligarchy is on maximum production and maximum consumption, instead of arranging conditions to maximize the growth of the individual. We have lost, Fromm said, the capacity to experience things personally, subjectively, with our hearts. Practical, greedy, ambitious, Fromm tells us a pathology of normality has arisen. Ours is a sick, insane society. The predicament of people in our time, Fromm said, is they no longer perceive themselves as a center of activity. Their will is sapped. They play no part in planning their work. They look for excitement instead of joy, for power instead of for power and prosperity instead of growth. They listen to what is common sense and public opinion instead of the stirrings of their own heart. Conforming to the group's practices keeps them from feeling a sense of isolation, stemming their anxiety about standing alone. What the individual has lost in the American oligarchy and the military intelligence complex which supports it is freedom. Yet it is freedom that Fromm tells us that is the fundamental condition for any growth. The suppression of freedom, Fromm says, is always accompanied by hatred. And what the American government has done with government gang stalking is give the average alienated, powerless person a target to hate. The solution to government gang stalking is to reform American society. Only a more egalitarian society can reverse the hate we see vented in government gang stalking by vast numbers of people. When we have not developed a sense of freedom, Fromm says, in our families, in our schools, in our workplaces, we often unconsciously seek symbiotic relationships with others, where we treat others as a part of ourselves, or we act like we are a part of other persons. When a person's individuality isn't developed because of the conditions in an oligarchy, they don't have a center in themselves. They relate to others in sadomasochistic ways. They escape from feelings of insignificance and powerlessness by trying to control others sadistically, or allowing themselves to be controlled masochistically. Symbiotic relationships are all about power. The masochist submits to authority to avoid feeling alone and anxious. He allows the other to make decisions for him, to direct, guide, and protect him. The sadist compensates for her feelings of impotence by exerting power over others. In achieving complete control over another person and causing her pain, the sadist transforms impotence into omnipotence. Usually a person is both sadistic and masochistic, but with different people. He submits to those with power and despises and wants to control those he sees as powerless who can't fight back. What the masochists and sadists lack is integrity. This is the government gang stalker the American oligarchy has spawned in such great numbers today.